Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Coming up on today's show, as negotiations advance for an agreement to pause the Israel-Hamas war and free civilian hostages, the families of the 136 that are thought to still be alive in Gaza are seeking justice and more public support. The 19-year-old cousin of Ashley Waxman-Bakshi has been held by Hamas for almost 4 months, and I'll be sharing her heartbreaking account shortly. And the decision by Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger to quit ECOWAS has been described by international observers as West Africa's Brexit moment that could impact trade in the region to the tune of $150 billion a year. I'll be discussing the fallout with Bolaji Shofulowe, who's the managing director of the trade consultancy firm, the ETK Group. Then later, Olu Adeosun, the chairman of the advisory board of the Five Cowries Arts Education Initiative, will be joining me from Lagos State to discuss the group's Vision 2030, which uses the arts and education to foster inclusion and economic growth across the country. But first, let's begin the show by taking a look at what's been trending on social media platforms this week, and we begin with LinkedIn. Business Day is seen adding their 2 cents to a big announcement from this week, and that is the appointment of Femi Otedola as the new chairman of First Bank's board of directors. The billionaire and philanthropist will succeed the outgoing chairman, Ahmad Abdullahi. First Bank of Nigeria notified investors of the new development in a corporate filing on the Nigerian Exchange Limited, published Wednesday. And on X, BBC News Africa are reporting the return of South African Airways. The troubled airline has disappeared from our skies altogether since September 2020, having fallen victim not just to COVID, but also another disease that has plagued some other state-run carriers: corruption and mismanagement. According to this post, the airline's interim CEO, John Lamola, said the situation had improved in the most recent financial year, with the airline now running on financial resources generated from its own operations. Then finally, this from London Economic on Facebook, which is shining the spotlight on the British Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins. The lawmaker is married to British Sugar Managing Director Paul Kenwood, which critics describe as a complete conflict of interest. January 31st, 2024, Wednesday, marked 4 years since Britain formally left the European Union. 4 years on, a recent poll suggests 57% of British adults believe Brexit has been a failure. 46% of those surveyed also said the bitter divorce has hit their family's standard of living. This compares with 11% stating that their household livelihood had improved under Brexit. This week's 4-year departure anniversary coincided with the commencement of new post-Brexit controls on food, plant and animal imports to Britain from the EU at a cost to small businesses of more than £300 million a year. Well, for more on this, I was earlier joined in the studio by our Downing Street correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, I can't believe it's been 4 years since the UK officially left the European Union. There are so many anniversary dates because, of course, we know the deal was so complicated. But it appears as if an anniversary present was a £300 million deal, because now we have checks on fresh goods coming into the UK from Europe, and it's the taxpayer and small businesses that are going to have to pay for this. It's not gone down well, has it? Yeah, and you mentioned complicated. I think for viewers to try and digest this, it's quite hard for us to get our heads around it, and I don't think anyone really out there completely knows everything that's going on. 4 years ago, we left the UK, and there's lots of discourse around the various pros and cons for that, and things that have gone right and wrong, and people said various things on the side of buses, and people didn't. The latest thing, the government is about to publish details of its deal sharing with the Democratic Unionist Party, that's the DUP, to restore Stormont power showering. So they've been, Stormont, the Northern Irish government, has not been sitting for 2 years. Imagine living in a country and your government just doesn't operate because they can't agree anything. So that's that's one good thing, as you mentioned. The government here also due to set out post-Brexit trade agreements between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK and the European Union.
Again, slightly different. The UK and the EU agreeing the Brexit deal known as the Windsor Framework in March 2023.
Right.
That's the thing that you were talking about. So this is, exactly, new tariffs for businesses. And there was times when Boris said various things like, well, you can't do this and we're going to have this. And we have the Northern Ireland basically now coming part of more of the UK, but there are going to be new tariffs set out there. Then there's post-Brexit controls on food, plant and animal products, imports to Britain from the EU. They've come into force. These are slightly new things again. That's going to push up the prices of various plants.
Yeah,
and
we
various
postponed that four times.
Yeah, and it's going to delay things a little bit more as well. And then the final sort of point about this really is that negotiations between the UK and Canada on a post-Brexit trade deal have broken down after nearly 2 years. There's just so many moving parts still to this whole sort of Brexit conundrum and arrangement. And as we go through various financial woes with the Ukraine crisis and now the crisis in Gaza and ships in the various canals, it's quite hard to know the sort of impact that Brexit in itself is playing, because the UK economy is affected by so many features around the world. But it's certainly not helping, is it? Because you have your biggest trading partner with the EU. Everything's very simple. All of these rules have been implemented and regulations over many, many years, and suddenly, in a very, very quick, short space of time, where we definitely weren't prepared, we've come out of that. And now we're just trying to sort of the dust is settling. I think, in terms of where we are and different.
There are no benefits.
No, I mean, I think if you were a Brexiteer, you'd say that
all the polls
are benefits. They would say, well, we have the freedoms to make our own, trade deals with this, and
free movement of people.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But Boris would say, if Boris was sitting here now, he'd of course say, Boris Johnson would say, well, we had the fastest vaccine rollout, and that's partly down to, there's
Margaret.
Always, well, yes, exactly. There's always, two different sides to every coin. I think most people would say that any sort of Brexit positives haven't come into force yet.
Yeah.
And that this will be a long-term thing, and maybe decades down the line we'll look back and say, oh, it was great, wasn't it? Look at the euro now, or look what's going on in the eurozone, and they have their own woes and we can be our own.
Yeah.
So, that's, I guess, the kind of optimist side, is to say that in the future we're going to feel these Brexit benefits. I think at the moment it's just headline after headline of, more taxes, more delays,
more boats.
Prices going up, exactly, boats coming over, and it's hard to see it in a positive light, but it's generally hard to keep across it, isn't it? Because there's so many different factors to it. And so many different things coming in, and the Ireland and Northern Ireland thing doesn't help at all, because that's yet another sort of layer on top of complexity.
Yes. Complex, complicated. I think that's politics in Britain today, isn't it? Thank you so much, Simon.
Thank you.
According to anonymous sources close to the matter, negotiations are advancing for an agreement to pause the Israel-Hamas war and free civilian hostages captured by Hamas. Following talks between spy chiefs and top officials in Paris last weekend, Qatar presented Hamas with a proposal that would see a 45-day pause and the release of Palestinian prisoners in exchange for all the women, children and elderly Israeli hostages. One of the young women captured from Israel on October the 7th is 19-year-old Agam Berger. Her cousin, Ashley Waxman-Bakshi, travelled from Israel to London this week, and she passed by the studio to relay her family's ordeal. Ashley Waxman-Bakshi, it's an absolute pleasure having you in the Channel's Business Global studio. You've had a very fleeting but impactful visit to London. I know you must be exhausted because, unfortunately, you're not here in London to talk about anything exciting or promoting your makeup brand. You're here to talk about your cousin, Agam, who, like so many others, has been held captive by Hamas for almost 4 months. Can you talk to me about her?
Absolutely. So firstly, this is her. She loves makeup as well. Should I hold it up like that? So that's Agam. She's 19. She plays the violin. And I want to tell you just something that will make you understand who Agam is, okay? Because when I was 19 years old, if you would have asked me on my 19th birthday, Ashley, what do you want? I would have said, I want my parents to buy me a car, and I want to pass all my exams at uni. And she wrote herself a letter on her 19th birthday, which we found now in her diary, and she wished for peace with the Palestinians. She wished for unity amongst the world and the nations and free love. This is the girl she is. She took a year off of her life to volunteer with special needs children and the less fortunate. She has a mood board in her room in which she wrote on it, "Giving cannot be quantified." Like, she is really, that is her. She is a volunteer. She is a good, pure soul, very, very innocent soul. Yes, she's the life of the party also. She has a twin sister. They're very different, so they're not identical. And Agam is the one always smiling and dancing and the life of the party. And her other sister, her twin sister, is more introverted. There are two other siblings, a younger sister who's 18, a younger brother who's 12. The family obviously is shattered. I'm here speaking on behalf of our family because Agam's parents honestly just cannot. It is so difficult to tell the story again and again and again. But I feel the need to do it because I still see traveling around the world, people not knowing that there are hostages or denying that there are hostages. So I think it's really important that we raise awareness, that people know.
Have you had any contact with her?
I mean, it's been 118 days that they're there. It's been 2 months since we last had a sign of life, and our biggest nightmares are haunting us every day. These girls don't have the time. I mean, one of the reason I came here to London is I spoke at the British Parliament, and it was specifically talking about the sexual violence from October 7th. And we know that there were gang rapes and things that are just really difficult for me to even say out loud. But if we know that these monsters were able to do this to women in 8 hours or 10 hours on the 7th of October, I don't want to imagine what they could be doing there for 117 days.
Yeah, it's absolutely horrifying, frightening, and one of the reasons why you are here, Ashley, like you said, you were at the all-party parliamentary group in the Palace of Westminster speaking to those who are trying to raise awareness. And one of the reasons why they're trying to raise awareness is because the conversation about what happened on October 7th and the subsequent war after that has completely divided the world. There have been pro-Palestinian protests, not just here in the British capital, but across other large cities. Some of them have been very hurtful towards Israeli Jewish communities. Have you been surprised by the anti-Israel sentiment that has been brewing? I've got to say mostly online, but certainly in communities across the world.
Surprised and not surprised. I mean, it's not new, but what I can say, and this I'd like to say to everyone listening, you can be pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian simultaneously. Yeah. I think what's important to...
Like Agam.
Exactly, and like myself. We are a peaceful people. We want peace. We didn't start this war. This war was started with a massacre and with the taking of 136 hostages. There's no controversy about should hostages be released. I think this is a matter of humanity. We can all agree that nobody should ever be taken hostage. And I think it's important for people to recognize that I don't want this war. I'm suffering from this war. There are rockets being shot at my house as well. My children are suffering from PTSD. None of us want this war. It could all end with, very simply, release of the hostages and the terrorist organization surrendering. I mean, I see innocent Palestinians in the worst conditions, and I see them dying, and it's a tragedy, and I feel for them, and I don't want any innocent people dying. We just need to hold the people responsible for this accountable. I want people to just, honestly, I know people sitting at home watching this, they're like, well, I can't do anything. I'm not in a government. Just pray. Just pray for these people. We are people of faith. We believe in Judeo-Christian values of liberty and humanity. And I just ask you to pray for these people. Pray for them to come home and continue to pray and continue to share the stories. Tell people about my baby cousin and why she needs to come home. It's not about politics. She needs to come home.
Thank you so much for taking the time out to come in and speak with us. And I do hope that the next time we catch up, Ashley, it will be because you're talking about Agam's release and everybody else.
I'll come back here with her.
OK, I think that's a date. Ashley Waxman-Bakshi, thank you so much for coming and talking to us today. Thank you. Coming up on Channel's Business Global, the decision by Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger to quit ECOWAS has been described by international observers as West Africa's Brexit moment that could impact trade in the region to the tune of $150 billion a year. I'll be discussing the fallout with Bolaji Sofulowe, who's the managing director of the trade consultancy firm, the ETK Group, and Olu Adeosun, the chairman of the advisory board of the Five Cowries Arts Education Initiative, will be joining me from Lagos State to discuss the group's Vision 2030, which uses the arts and education to foster inclusion and economic growth across Nigeria. All of this after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. The African Union has called for dialogue between the Economic Community of West African states and the junta-led countries Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso, who has said they will leave the bloc. The trio's decision to exit ECOWAS is a blow to the bloc's regional integration and has been described by international observers as West Africa's Brexit. I discussed this and more with Bolaji Sofulowe, the managing director of the trade consultancy firm, the ETK Group. Bolaji Sofulowe, thank you so much for joining me in the Channel's Business Global studio. It's always a pleasure to have you. I know you're an extremely busy lady, but it's an extremely important topic with those three departures from ECOWAS. Quite interestingly, a lot of observers in the West have described this as West Africa's Brexit moment. Do you agree?
Thank you for having me, Juliana. It's always a pleasure to be here. I have to start by saying that it's not quite as dramatic as that, for a couple of reasons. So they have just sent formal notification in. A couple of days it was a mere vicious rumour, but now they've sent formal notifications into ECOWAS to indicate that they'll be looking to leave within a year. They have formed their own alliance, and they are looking to create more security within their borders. And that's one of the reasons why they say they're leaving. We do not know what the structure of that deal will look like. We don't know what the entire decoupling would look like. As you know, it took quite a while to negotiate the terms of Brexit. This is a very similar situation. This has been a trade bloc since 1975. And so there are obviously quite a few things that need to be discussed and agreed before this is complete.
If you look on X, where, gosh, you can't avoid it, even though, people try and dismiss what's discussed there as, like, mere distraction. But a lot of people use it. And if you look on that platform, there has been some accusations and fingers pointed towards Nigeria because, of course, we hold the presidency of ECOWAS, and they say that the president should have used more diplomacy, less sanctions when he was negotiating with Niger, Burkina Faso and Mali. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't really agree with that. I think at the end of the day, when there is a military intervention in a sovereign nation, the first reaction of the nations around them would be to punish that act, to discourage others, because ultimately Africa is sort of heading towards democracy across the continent and does not want to encourage that kind of intervention. So they're obviously going to react by placing sanctions, which I wouldn't say is as aggressive as some of the other rhetoric that we were hearing around military intervention as well. So I think, it was right and it was proper for some sanctions to be placed, though we've now found out that they were ineffective. But I think that ultimately these three nations, unfortunately, are going to find themselves in extreme economic isolation, being landlocked, heavily depending on the ports of Lomé and Abidjan. So I just wonder what that deal is going to look like.
What is happening with Africa trading within itself, and why are these stumbling blocks constantly popping up?
ETK has been doing this for several years, and we have discovered that the tensions that we are seeing in West Africa at the moment have been going on for quite a while. It has just culminated in a junta taking over in these countries. So You know, I think that what Africa needs to do, you've just come back from Davos and I watched your coverage quite intently. And, you know, the topic was rebuilding trust. Yeah. But I suppose what we now need to sit back and think about is, was there trust in the first place? What was the basis for that trust? And we need to sit down and actually rebuild the foundations of that first. And African leaders need to have an honest conversation with each other. They need to stop the external interventions in their affairs and come together with policies and programs that suit the people of the continent and move forward with them with intention.
I think that's a great way to end the discussion. Bolaji Shofolowe, who is the Managing Director of the ETK Group Enterprise Trade and Knowledge, which is the bridge which brings UK businesses into Nigeria and across Africa. Now to my final topic. Last week, the Spanish ambassador's residence in Abuja played host to the 5 Cowries Arts Education Initiative, which was launching Vision 2030. It's a programme designed to foster inclusion and economic growth through the arts. Olu Adeosun is the chairman of the advisory board of the FCI, and he joins me now from Lagos for more on this. Olu Adeosun, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join me on Channels Business Global today. So last week, the 5 Cowries Arts Education Initiative launched Vision 2030 at the residence of the Spanish ambassador in Abuja. I think we're showing some of those pictures now. What exactly is this programme hoping to achieve?
Thank you very much, Juliana. 5 Cowries Arts Education Initiative is an NGO. What we do is we deliver programs, learning programs that enhance formal training using arts and culture to deliver it. The punchline is that the Vision 2030 program is really looking at delivering 19 hubs, 19 learning hubs across 19 states across northern Nigeria. The idea is that we're going to use a program delivered by teachers, by trainers who we call aunties, who will then work with caregivers and work with children at home and children who are also in school to deliver this program. And arts and culture is really how we deliver it. The impact that we're hoping to create is really what's, I think what's incredible about this, is that by 2030, we're hoping to have about 40,000 children fully trained through this program. We'll have another 80,000 who are trained using indirect sources. Delivering that would be about 600 aunties, who will then train about 200 caregivers. And what we have there is really just a chain and a network of delivery that allows children who are out of school or children who are potentially at risk of being left behind of the formal education program to not get left behind and to keep track of learning.
Here in Britain, the most recent data suggests that the arts and culture industry contributes a whopping £8.5 billion to the economy. Now, it goes without saying that in Nigeria, we should be, and we could be, accumulating at least double that. What are some of the stumbling blocks preventing us from really harnessing our unique and rich culture?
So I'm still trying to digest that number because 8.5 billion is, I think in today's exchange rate, that's about 17 trillion.
Wow.
17 trillion naira. And so if we take your estimation that we should double that, that's 38 trillion naira. I'm not quite sure there's anything in the economy that delivers that level of value into the economy. So I think if we were able to harness that, it would really be something. Now, there are some challenges. You're completely correct. Arts and culture has blown up. And there are have been pockets and slices of activities in Nigeria, for instance, that are really starting to showcase talent. If we look at programs like ArtX delivers, I'm not quite sure how much it delivers, but it delivers a lot of attention, focus into Lagos. Nigeria becomes an art hub for a while. And really what we see there is we see a lot of people bringing in funds and inflow of FX into the country. And that's across the board. Hotels get booked up, taxis get filled, restaurants are full, nightclubs are full. So really, the contribution that we think art can make is more indirect than direct. And I think the big difference, which is what we've got to talk about first, between what happens in the UK, in Britain, and what happens in Nigeria is the way the arts and culture are funded. They're funded via endowments, trust funds, donations, large gifts, national funds, for instance, through the National Lottery, that really earmark some funds and make sure that they are channeled properly through these very strong arts and cultural institutions, the British museums, the Tates, the Royal Opera Houses, all those things, and the theatres in the West End. I think it's really important to kind of differentiate how arts and culture contributes to the economy, though, because it doesn't do it directly. Arts and culture are like infrastructure. It doesn't matter how much you put in. It's never going to pay you back directly. It's always an investment. But what it does do, and what it does do very well, is that it puts you on the map and it pays you handsomely indirectly through all those other channels, through the jobs and other opportunities that there are there.
You know, we've got to start taking arts and culture and education as seriously as the Brits do here, because it does trickle down and it affects every community. Thank you so much, Olu Adeosun, who is the chairman of the advisory board at the Five Cowries Arts Education Initiative. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much
today.
Thank you.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.